How you doing?
Good, Brian. How's it going?
Good, good. I am excited. I'm fired up. Hey, everybody. We are so excited about the Gapology guys. So, welcome to our first ever episode of our new video first podcast. And we're calling this the Gapology guys. And it's a shift from
Woohoo!
our normal audio podcast that we do, Gapology Radio, that we've hosted really since 2018. We've had that. And we're still going to leave that up and running. We'll have that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all that stuff. So if you normally have gotten your podcast there, you can still listen to it there. But we also wanted to sort of jump into the video arena here on YouTube and have some fun with this sort of new format on our Gapology YouTube channel. This way, you get to see our lovely faces and get to interact with us a little bit better, I think. So for anyone listening to this on the Gapology Radio Audio podcast, make sure to come over to YouTube as well and check out our YouTube show here for the full experience.
And get to
Uh,
see us, right?
what's that?
And get to see us.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Get to actually put faces to our voices, I guess. And so we're excited. We're excited about Gapology guys. And Mark, when you came up with this name, I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then you explained the whole kind of story behind it. You want to kind of kick us off with that story?
Oh, I had done a session in Las Vegas at a hotel on Gapology, teaching it to a large organization. And later that day, I was walking down the strip and I heard these voices screaming, "There's the Gapology guy!" And I suddenly felt like somebody, you know. It was a big deal. So you and I are the Gapology guys. We just didn't realize it.
Right? I actually really love it. The more I thought about it, and Mark presented this to me, I don't know, a couple months ago. We've taken a long hiatus on our audio podcast because we really wanted to put together something really kind of cool with this video-based format here. So, but when he shared that, I thought, what a fun story, and we're going to try to be professional and share real professional leadership type information here, but we want to be real as well, and you guys get to see us in our real form. So, but we thought we'd lay out the groundwork on this first one on what is Gapology. To kick it off, we wanted to do it right and give you sort of the origins of Gapology and a little bit of an overview for everyone to sort of catch up if you're not familiar with our audio podcast. So, Mark, do you want to kick us off here? Where did it all begin?
Yeah. So as my career progressed, I eventually got promoted to where I had 1,000 leaders under me. So think about that for a minute. Brian was one of them.
That's right.
So he was there from the beginning.
Right.
And I had this incredible curiosity because the results varied so dramatically within my team. So I pulled up the quarterly results and we were accountable for 5 metrics. And there was this group of the upper 10% that were blowing everybody away. And then there was this group of the bottom 10% that was coming up way short. And I called them the A group, the top 10%, the C group, the bottom 10%. And there was this big middle, the B. And what perplexed me as a top performing leader was that the C group was wiping out the A group. So their performance negated the A group. And we ended up as this mediocrity B. And we were in a business where we had the same product, we had the same advertising and advertising direction each week, ran different ads every week. And the results were just dramatically different. So every week I traveled, I caught an airplane somewhere. And when I got to a market, I went to the A's and I went to the C's. And I didn't tell them I was coming. And I just tried to understand the difference in behavior between the A and the C. And wow, did I learn a lot. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I definitely remember those surprise visits for sure. Uh, Still somewhat traumatized over that, but no, it was great, and it was always a great learning experience. And one of the things that I always took away, especially when you started teaching Gapology, was it's important to understand that difference between the A and the C, and that the C wipes out all those wonderful results of that A group, and you're left with B. So I think it's important for all leaders, if you live in that B sort of life where you're always there, really think through that. Think about, what are those A players, maybe your peers, what are they doing that you're not?
Yeah, so the first big takeaway I had was that the A group was behaviorally quite different than the C group, and that the results, therefore, were behavioral. So that was huge for me. It wasn't market driven. So the A group in Houston, the A group in Minneapolis, the A group in Kansas City, and Brian was in that A group, by the way, they were different. They were behaving differently. And it was incredible to go visit the A and just experience it as a small business customer shopping in a retail store. And then to go to the C group and visit with a group of people that had the same direction, the same advertising, the same product, same customer, and see that the behavior was incredibly different. It didn't come close to the A group. I told Brian that sometimes and oftentimes the cashier in the A group was stronger than the leadership team in the C group. It was pretty amazing. And the biggest conclusion, though, was that it was behavioral and therefore it could be changed. And it was pretty amazing. So the A and the C taught me this thing called Gapology. And Gapology became the obvious name. There was a gap in the behavior that was being closed in the A group that was not being closed in the C group. And so it all started to come together with the comparison of the A and C. So literally, I would be in Houston in an A group store. They don't know who I am. And I'm experiencing the same behavior in Minnesota, in Kansas City, in Indianapolis, in Denver, in the A group stores. They had figured it out. So I concluded that not only is great performance behavioral, but that something about what I was calling gapology was woven inside of us. It was this human nature, and likely it could be replicated. So we started teaching it at that point, and Brian was part of that group. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting when you're looking at these groups. You almost have to start with looking at the metrics, looking at the A group, and then going in and inspecting what is creating this greatness with the A group. Sort of have an A group lens on it. And then with the C group, you kind of do the same thing, where you look at the metrics and then you go in and inspect why they're C, kind of have a C group lens where you're looking for what are those behaviors that are missing that the A group is doing.
Yeah, I got really curious about, okay, could the C group, if I taught them what the A group was doing, could they improve their performance? And the answer was, of course, yes. So we started announcing the visits then. I don't know if you remember that. And I started asking questions in the A group stores. And this pattern emerged that was crazy. And it was KINA. And I don't think the Kia Motor Company was in existence back then. I didn't know of it anyway. And everything kept coming KINA. And we're talking to people in different markets who don't know each other, who don't know anything about KINA. And it was very clear that the A group was closing the knowledge gap, closing the importance gap, and then closing the action gap by that with their team and creating great performance. And suddenly I realized oh my God, maybe this is teachable. Is winning teachable? Is closing performance gaps teachable? Is this something we can do everywhere? And it all started coming together. So one of the first classes I conducted on the KINA, which is Gapology, was in Brian's store in Minneapolis. And wow, the connection was incredible. And the results just happened. And we became the top performing, well, let's call it a territory in the organization very quickly. And it never ended.
Mhm.
It never ended because KINA was being taught everywhere. It was being executed everywhere. And we found that even the C group, if they were taught knowledge gap closure, importance gap closure, action gap closure, could become top performers. So some of that C group became the top, and we came much better than the B. Let's put it that way. So it was an exciting time, and I guess one we'll never forget.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree. Something that I wrote down that when you were talking there that I thought was interesting, that winning can be taught, and I think a lot of times people think these really great leaders, these winning leaders, they're sort of born with that talent. And while I think there's some element there, but it's not about charisma. It's not about being able to speak really well. If you can learn the methods that we lay out in Gapology, you can instantly change your results. And I will testify to that because after that training meeting that you're talking about, Mark, I went back immediately and applied it immediately. I didn't go home after the
Same
training.
day,
I went
same
back.
day.
Yeah, exactly. And taught it and basically used it with my team members. And it completely transformed not just the results that day, but the people that I met with that day.
Well, often what we learned was that the gap was actually with the leader.
Yep, absolutely.
So that C group wasn't, deficient. They just didn't know gapology and they weren't being led correctly. So we found that the knowledge gap is really owned by the leader. So if there's knowledge gaps in the team, that's a leader issue. That's not a team issue. The leaders in the A group were closing the knowledge gap. We then found that the importance gap was a leader issue. If the leader closed the importance gap and the knowledge gap, guess what? Action happened. So we found that often it was simply the leader. And many of the C group stores and team members became top performers by simply having the knowledge gap and the importance gap closed. So the sequence is critical. So first you close the knowledge gap and the leader owns that. Then you close the importance gap and the leader owns that. And then that closes the action gap with those that choose to execute. And that really becomes the choice of the team. And once we learned that and saw that, great things happened. And the company noticed and they said, "Hey, you got to write a book." I said, "Write a book? You got to be kidding me." So anyhow, we ended up teaching this everywhere and eventually writing a book about KINA, which we call Gapology.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting the ownership piece. That is, I would say in all the workshops that I've taught, that seems to be the number one takeaway that people have at the end. When they come up at the end or when we go around and ask everybody for their takeaways, almost almost to the person, their number one takeaway is the fact that they own the gaps, that it's them. So if they look at the results on their scorecard, they know that that's their results. That's a reflection of their leadership. So absolutely each of these gaps, so the knowledge gap, absolutely importance gap, we own that. We can't blame the team if they don't understand what to do or how to do it. We can't blame them if they don't know why or when they need to do something, right? The action gap is a little bit different. There's some co-ownership there around making sure that we're creating accountability and creating a culture of action and commitment. But at that point, the team member does need to sort of take the ball and run with it.
Yeah, that part's pretty amazing. I mean, the first thing we learned is that there's gaps everywhere. So when you teach leaders how to close gaps, they become much better and the organization becomes much better. So there are gaps everywhere. They occur all the time, and you have to be prepared for them as a leader. What we found in the A group is that they were proactively closing gaps. They were determining what gaps might occur, and they were going after it before they could occur. So think about that. They were closing the gaps before they happened. Amazing. But the biggest takeaway was still that many of those C leaders and many of those C team members became A. They had that capability. So once they were taught Gapology, they became top performers. And that's a game changer. And sometimes it was a choice. They didn't want to perform, they didn't want to close gaps, they didn't need to be on the team. But often, most often, they wanted to perform. They took great pride in their performance, and once they learned it, it's pretty amazing. So gaps happen everywhere, and if leaders understand Gapology, they can excel to a level they probably have not seen before. And again, within a group that doesn't know Gapology, they will outperform them, you know, by great measure. Gapology has worked everywhere we have ever used it. Safe to say?
Yeah, 100%.
Every industry,
Yep.
with every group we've ever taught. Think about that. We have never missed. And again, it spans every industry that we're aware of.
Mhm.
It just simply works. So again, it's part of human nature. It's likely woven within each of us. We just need to bring it out and you know excel within it. One of our first clients was the 25th largest company in the United States. And they found that it worked in every division that they had. It worked in transportation, it worked in manufacturing, it worked in the sales department, and it became their foundation. That really helped us quite a bit. It totally exploded in the restaurant world. If restaurants use it, if you're not using it today and you run a restaurant, you're making a big mistake because you got lots of gaps, and gaps happen every few seconds there. So teach your leaders Gapology and everything changes. We came from the retail world. We worked in retail for a number of years, and it totally blows the doors off sales in retail.
Yep.
We we sold dramatically more per customer. We sold more customers. We signed up more rewards winners. You go through the list of things we were accountable for, we would be number one by far in each rather easily, simply by using Gapology. It works in finance. It works in banking. We expanded it to Christianity and Africa. It worked there. What am I missing? Car dealerships, it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, Mark, and I haven't even told you this, literally right before we dialed into this, I was responding to a message somebody sent me on LinkedIn that was asking about how Gapology fits in the virtual world. So she has a virtual workforce, and they primarily work in a silo on their own and with their own little work groups, right? So very little oversight. And she was asking how it fits in there. And so I was typing back a response how it fits that really anywhere that there's a leader and a team, it'll work.
Yeah, so we wrote Gapology 15 years ago. We're going to update it here shortly. The world has changed somewhat since then, but Gapology still works everywhere. But for those of you that work in the remote workforce, so many people work from home today, and it's difficult to connect in the same way and read body language. It's unbelievably effective in the remote workforce. And leaders that we know that have learned Gapology and taught Gapology and leveraged that as their number one go-to are incredibly successful in the remote workforce. In fact, you need it more than ever in the remote workforce. I can't explain it in AI. I don't understand AI, Brian, so you'll have to walk me through it when you get time. But
Yeah. That's what I figured
In
out.
the remote workforce, Gapology works. So back when Brian and I were leveraging it, we did conference calls, and they were not video. There was no such thing as video. We didn't have cell phones for the most part, and it worked in that environment. But it seems to have grown in terms of its intensity and in terms of its impact. And it works. Thank you, Brian, for sharing the spread of our training courses across the world. For anybody that doesn't know, Gapology is now worldwide, and it's almost bigger in in India and South Asia than in the U.S. and England.
In
It's
some
getting
places,
there.
yeah.
It's getting there.
Yeah.
So we only wrote the book in English, so sorry about that. But it's big, and it works in every environment we've ever taught it in. One of the most incredible stories that we have is from the nonprofit world, where we taught nonprofit organizations how to exceed their financial goals by leveraging Gapology, and it works.
Yep. Yeah, whatever you're going after, you have expectations and you have results. And if you're not meeting your expectations, you have to start taking a look at the behaviors that are driving those results. So whether it's profit or nonprofit, it doesn't matter. Every industry out there has some sort of expectations they're going after, goals, objectives, whatever you're going after.
One thing you may not know is every night after I would do a training class and I would talk to those A group leaders, I would ask them how they're closing the knowledge gap, how they're closing the importance gap, and how they're closing the action gap. And that's how I found the root solutions. So for any of you that don't know the root solutions, those are the things within each of the gaps that closes it. And the knowledge gap is closed first off by training. So the leaders have to be trainers. They have to be relentless in that. They have to understand that training is not one size fits all, and that the greatest performer on the team may not be the first one to get the training and understand it. So training is something you may come back to and come back to. The second was teaching. And some say, well, wait a minute, training and teaching are the same thing. No, they're not. So we found that the A group leaders that were blowing everybody away viewed their role as teachers. They taught all day long, all day long. Every interaction was teaching. And that was a game changer. And then the third, and there's three root solutions for each of the gaps. The third for the knowledge gap was talent. They looked for the most talented people, and talent often overcomes, many things, and it often overcomes the training and teaching. So they went after the most talented people. So the knowledge gap was closed with training, teaching, and hiring talented people, and that just sealed the deal. And they created everybody we know that was in that A group when we first started looking at this is incredibly successful today, up to the level of presidents of organizations today. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we have lots of success stories around that.
And guess what they teach their teams?
Yeah, Gapology.
Gapology.
Yeah.
We then found the importance gap was closed with the biggest thing by far is clear expectations. Clear expectations. What do you expect me to achieve? What are the numbers? What are the metrics? How am I measured? And so the leaders that came back to those expectations over and over again and posted them and ranked them and taught them, it changed everything. So clear expectations was the biggest root solution by far in closing the importance gap. And then just clear communication ongoing, and then prioritization. The team has to be clear on the priorities. So expectations, communication, and prioritization nailed the importance gap. Once the leader was great at those things, wow, The knowledge gap was closed. The importance gap was closed. And then what Brian and I found was that the action gap was really up to the team. They had to choose. You want to do this? You want to be on the team? You want to be great? You want to be part of this? You've got to choose to act. And so leaders that created accountability here, huge. You've got to perform to be on the team. One of the great things we found was that the top performing team members wanted to be on a team where the team performed. They didn't want to be surrounded by people that didn't perform. So they loved accountability. They loved the fact that people wouldn't make the team. And you see that in professional athletics today. You can't always make the team, but we want the greatest people on our team. They then looked at the leader and the others on the team and said, what's their commitment? I want to be with committed people. And if the leader shied away from commitment, they didn't want to be on the team. We were in a retail environment and we had a leader who would walk by a customer like they didn't exist. And the team said, you know what? They don't have the commitment that we have. So we as leaders, Brian and I would talk to every customer we came near to, and we would work to help them, and we would display a level of commitment that we wanted from the team. And that created the culture that we wanted, culture of action, culture of commitment, culture of accountability. So the root solutions for action were accountability, commitment, and culture. And once we had those 9 things, we were unstoppable. And then they worked everywhere we put them in place. So sorry for going so long, but wow, what a journey we've been on. The Gapology guys have impacted, you think we've got to 1 million? I guess we've got over 1 million people we've impacted now, huh?
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to say. I would say, with just workshops alone, and then what people in those workshops have gone on and taught, and then the podcast we've been doing since 2018, our audio podcast. So all of those episodes. So it's hard to measure that, but what I will say is that it amazes me. From time to time, we'll get somebody that will come up to us and say, "Oh yeah, this really meant something to me." And last year, toward the end of the year, we sort of stopped doing some podcasts, took a little bit of a break. We're doing some other things, and I got lots of messages. Hey, when's the next episode coming out? So we know that's making an impact.
So the Gapology journey that the Gapology guys have been on has been really pretty unbelievable. Mm-hmm. We had somebody else teaching Gapology recently that got 5 million views.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Off of some Instagram and TikTok stuff. Yeah.
So Gapology is real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going away. If you're a leader and you learn it and roll it out, you'll fully understand that. And I mean, even today, I interacted with people I'd never met that talked about how Gapology had impacted their career and their life, and how it was of great significance. So it goes on, and it doesn't matter what you do; it works. Didn't we have a school teacher that made Teacher of the Year?
Yeah. So the first version of our book. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any experience in any of this stuff. And this gentleman was our editor for our book, and he was Teacher of the Year here in Kansas. Amazing guy. He was using it in the classroom. So we never wrote it for schools at all, but he looked at it and said, you know what? Teacher's the leader in the classroom. Students, they're the sort of followers in the classroom. And everything fell into place. It still applied.
Yeah, so it simply works.
Yeah.
It's about all of us.
Right.
And it will work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And in future podcast episodes, we're going to really dive into this stuff. You guys, Mark just gave everyone sort of a high level overview of where we came from, what it's all about. Just in case you haven't been experienced with Gapology. So we will be providing lots and lots of detail. We've got a ton of content, some really good stuff that we'll be able to share with everybody.
I wanted to touch on underperformers before we go.
Yeah, please.
So as leaders, you likely have on your team underperformers. If you haven't identified them, please do so. So pull out the results and identify your underperformers. What we would advise there may be different than you're thinking. We think you may be the issue. So for the underperformers, we want you to ensure that the knowledge gaps are closed. Literally, that the knowledge gaps are closed. We have a habit ladder in Gapology that you can use, and it's very helpful for that. We want you to then ensure that the importance gap is closed. So we want you to go through each of the aspects of the knowledge gap and of the importance gap and ensure that they're closed. Once you're confident that those are closed, then it's okay to declare someone as an underperformer. Without that, you're the underperformer. You're creating it. And we've been there. So this is not a criticism of you. We understand it. We didn't understand it initially. So the leader needs to own the underperformance and ensure that they've closed the knowledge and importance gap. Anything to add there? I know you're an expert on that, Brian.
Yeah, no, I think, looking at your reporting, understanding that results, that's just the evidence of a behavior. So if the results are underperforming, there's some sort of underperforming behavior. And when you're looking at expectations, those things need to be in alignment. So I would start there.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So it's a great thing when the leader owns underperformance and says, hey, maybe it's me, and figures out how to help. We have literally had examples there where that underperformer became the top performer because the leader stepped in and said, hey, I'm closing the knowledge and importance gap.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted them to hear that part.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Perfect. Any last thoughts then?
It's been an amazing experience. We're very privileged to have been part of it. Those of you that take what we've talked about can potentially take it further. And we'd love to hear from you. We love your success stories. Again, I heard some today. I love that. It's great, but it's not about us. It's something much bigger than us. And the Gapology guys are here to just help you on your journey.
Yep. Our purpose is helping leaders achieve their greatest potential. That's what we're all about. Everything's about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to learn more about Gapology or any of our other books, products, services, our video-based course, we have Gapologies on Audible now, any of that kind of stuff, head on over to our website, gapology.org, for all the details you can find right there. So otherwise, just reach out to us on social media or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you.
And we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. See you, Mark.
Bye.